Today we have Anna Kelbert from the NASA SciX team, and she's going to be giving a talk about their data system, and we're happy to have her. Anything else you'd like to say for an introduction, Anna, before we get started here with your talk?
I'm just really grateful for you finding the time for this talk. It's hopefully it's going to start a set of fruitful collaborations. That's my hope for this. And I guess I should just say that my role within the SciX team is I'm the relatively newly hired Earth Science project scientist within the team. So I'm responsible for the Earth science content in the system.
Great.
One of the people responsible for that, let's say. Should I go ahead?
Sure. Great.
Great.
Get started. Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah. So the Science Explorer, I'll introduce Science Explorer, and then I'll just say a few things about how ECIP, CDF, and Science Explorer could be really helpful to each other, I think. So first of all, let's see, nothing is working for me today. There we go. Okay, so first of all, we are operating under a cooperative agreement from NASA, but we are not new to digital library, kind of to digital information representation. So we are a rebranding of something called the ADS, the Astrophysics Data System, that has been in existence for over 30 years. Initially, the first incarnation of ADS happened even before the World Wide Web came online. And it was envisioned as a digital resource for the astrophysics community. Because for the astrophysicists, it's always been really critical to know, who is talking, who has looked at specific astronomical objects. And this was a resource that connected digital libraries, or rather created a digital library, connected publications to mentions of those astronomical objects. And this was a really critical resource, and it still is a critical resource to the astrophysics astronomical community. If you're an astrophysicist, most likely you're using it likely daily. It's a go-to resource for astrophysical and astronomical literature. So very recently the brief history, I guess I should have mentioned that it was envisioned in 1980s, and it only joined the World Wide Web in 1994, but it's been in active use by the scientists all those years, and it's only 2024 when we, last year, when we started expanding into other communities, actively expanding. So SciX is essentially a rebranding of IDS with this expansion idea. We received additional funding from NASA to expand to all areas of NASA science. And I'll tell you exactly what we do and what's the scope of the project. But as far as disciplinary content, the idea is to cover and unify all of those areas of science, specifically in addition to astrophysics, that's planetary sciences, heliophysics, earth science, that's a big one, and also to some extent NASA-funded biological and physical sciences as well. And another component of this, which has a lot to do with the CDF, is connections to data and software. Okay, so that actually launched in December 2023, and it was first launched at the AGU meeting 2023, and since then we've ingested a great number of journals and other content, and I'll tell you about that. So why SciX? Well, the NASA SMD, Science Mission Directorate, has specifically called for the creation of interdisciplinary literature portal spanning across those disciplines. So among the other things, they wanted to increase transparency into how science data are being used through a free and open unified journal server. So we were commissioned to submit a proposal, which we did and got funded. The organizational structure of the team actually, it's like I said, the team has been around for a long time and works smoothly, like a clock, like a good clock, quantum clock, maybe. But I guess the point is there is a center of operations where we have a development team, we have a curation team, and these people work very closely together on their various aspects of the system. And then we also have, we came up with this pentapus image to describe how this works. So there is a central brain with the director's office and the operations, the search, the backend, front end, and content ingestion. And then there are disciplinary parts to it. There is earth science, biological, physical sciences, BPS, astrophysics, heliophysics, and planetary science. And we have the SciX project has hired scientists to represent those disciplines. And unfortunately, due to some budgetary constraints, we only have an astrophysics project scientist on the team, Jennifer Bartlett. We have a planetary scientist, Stephanie Yarmak, and myself for the earth science. We do not have currently a heliophysics or a BPS scientist. Okay, so as far as content and curation approach, the time-honored tradition has been to maintain a core collection, and the core is where we believe we're fully authoritative. We have the full content. If we don't have something, I'm very actively engaging with the community to ingest anything that we don't have. Then everything that's being cited by the core or everything that cites the core is also best effort. We try to ingest that as well, as much as we can. And then the third thing is, everything that's cited or citing the inner ring is so actually authoritative, strong, and best effort is how we describe those three layers of content. So historically, the ADS has been focusing on astronomy and astrophysics, but also that also involved quite a bit of physics and engineering as well. So that's been the core content for the system. With this expansion, the core has now expanded to all of those areas of earth sciences, and of course planetary sciences as well, and heliophysics. But of course, the earth sciences is a very broad field. It's much less focused than astronomy, and there is a lot of content to ingest and a lot of disciplinary knowledge to account for. So we have surveyed the disciplines based on the Web of Science taxonomy, and we identified those that we consider to be core at this point, and then those that are in gray, we consider them best effort core, so like our second number 2 core category. So they're kind of the more applied parts of the earth sciences. And the goal is to ingest all of that content. We actively work with publishers. So as opposed to, say, Google Scholar, who doesn't curate the content and doesn't directly work with the publishers, we have agreements with the publishers. We already have agreements with all the major publishers, and we're actively going after those that we don't have right now for the smaller publishers as well. And then we ingest the full content of the scientific literature. Of course, we cannot share that with everybody freely because of the publisher agreements. But when you go into the system and search through the literature, you can see, you can search through the full text. And I'll talk about that as well. So, and you can also, we're actively working on other capabilities. For example, you can also search directly through the acknowledgements section only. But there is more that we can do here. Okay, so a flashback to the Earth Cube community, of which, of course, the CDF is a very fruitful and very powerful outcome. If you happen to remember, I was heavily involved in the Earth Cube project, and if you remember back about a decade ago, there was a stakeholder alignment survey led by Joel Kutcher Gershenfeld about interdisciplinary communication. And what he found was kind of curious that, of course, people within their discipline, they tend to communicate with other professionals in their discipline. And this shows percentages reporting daily, weekly, or monthly communication with other people, other researchers in. So the diagonal shows researchers, communication with researchers in your own discipline. And just in case you haven't encountered this interesting result or haven't seen it for a while, those the columns and the rows in this table show and the intersection between these show communication across disciplines, and as you can see, it's actually very low. Some disciplines just don't communicate. Like somewhat surprisingly to me at the time, geophysicists very rarely communicate with geographers. Although one would think that there would be quite a few commonalities between the two. Always, geographers don't talk with oceanographers either. Geologists don't talk with atmospheric and space weather scientists or climate scientists. Well, I mean, there is a lot to improve here, but this whole idea of decreasing the friction for interdisciplinary science, that's what SciX is all about, really. So we want to serve the earth science community, and we would love to work with the CDF. Specifically, we're in the business of knowledge organization, and our knowledge is based on the scientific literature. We can do natural language processing on the literature, and we do a lot of that. We also develop AI tools, and we can talk about that as well. So one of the obvious connections for us is to identify which data sets, which software were used in the scientific research that's been published, and connect the literature to those resources. So if you are responsible for data repository, especially if you have DOIs for your resources, we would love to connect to those DOIs through our literature resource. Let's see. NASA is directly responding to the decadal survey of NASAM, the National Academies, and to serve that, to serve the community better in that context, we are trying to improve content coverage and for that we interface with NASA divisions. We interface with publishers and archives, and then we ingest all of the relevant scientific literature. We ingest everything that we can get. We don't. Well, I guess that's. I should be more careful with that. We are very careful with predatory journals, but we ingest all of the real scientific information that we can get our hands on. We use large language models to mine papers for data and software citations, as I mentioned, and we index those resources, and we're actively working on that. We are also working on semantic search capabilities. We have synonyms in our system, but we are very interested in doing something more sophisticated with organized ontologies and taxonomies. and we would love to talk to you about that as well. We are improving author name disambiguation we already have ORCID integration, but we're also developing author profiles. We're working on UI enhancements. And most importantly, we're interested in linking the literature to the key research questions that I mentioned, identified by the national academies and mentioned in the NASA core reports as well. And for that, we use modern text processing and AI techniques. And the idea is we want to create a dynamic ecosystem that adapts to emerging scientific trends and allows smooth and friction-free interdisciplinary exploration of scientific literature. Okay, so as far as linking to the data, we already have over 80,000 data links and about 125,000 citations for data products. That's why we're here. We would love to work with you on this. We have been pioneers in scientific AI and ML initiatives. SciX developed something called Astrobird, which is an astrophysics-specific language model that's being used by NASA in many areas of NASA. And we actually one of the challenges in applying AI technology to scientific literature is that publishers are very careful about letting us do that, because that's something that they want to do themselves. They don't want people to access their information through us in full, so that people should have, from the publisher standpoint, people should have an incentive to go to their website. But there are things that can and should be done in that realm, and we're working on that. For instance, we are very interested in developing geolocation for scientific literature. So we would like to be able to mine geolocation from scientific text as well as figures in scientific papers, and enrich the scientific literature with this information as well. Okay, named entity. So we do quite a lot as far as enriching scientific literature with standardized keywords and taxonomies. So for astrophysics, there is the Unified Astronomy Thesaurus, UAT. We also do planetary feature name indexing, and we are actively working on our strategy for the earth sciences. So we would love to talk to you all about that. Yeah, we're also normalizing institutional affiliations, which is much more than Google Scholar does. As far as coverage, just a quick overview of the metrics. If you look at so this shell kind of shows our rough comparison of our content as compared to Google Scholar right now, and the dials on the clock sort of are the disciplines, and the red line is 1, so 100% coverage compared to Google Scholar. That's obviously unachievable because Google Scholar is not curated and has a lot of extraneous and duplicated stuff that we do not want to replicate. So if you look at astronomy and astrophysics, we have definitive coverage in that discipline, and this is it's just below 0.9, and this is approximately where we want to be for all of the disciplines. But as you can see, we're getting there for planetary sciences. We're reasonably close for geochemistry and geophysics, but we're not even close for some of the other disciplines like ecology and environmental sciences and mining, crystallography, and whatnot. We're actively ingesting the content, though, so we expect to be reasonably complete, if not perfectly complete, in a couple of years. As far as journal coverage now as compared to the Web of Science, if you just look at the journals, so this is like the pure number of journals, and as you can see, astronomy and astrophysics by itself has less than 100 distinct journals, and everything else is the new content that we're actively acquiring. So the blue bars show the number of journals that we have in the system, and maybe not entirely complete. We are working on completeness yet, but those are the journals that are currently indexed in the system. The orange are the journals that are not in the system, but are in the Web of Science. But as you can see, if I scroll further, if you just look at the number of citations, so the number of journals by the number of citations, we are much more complete than that, because if all those journals that are not indexed, they tend to be kind of niche, smaller journals. They're still very important, and we're still actively ingesting them. But they're mostly the so-called quarter 3, quarter 4 journals in the Web of Science. Anyway, we're working on it, and as far as completeness, we've done some comparisons, and we are in many disciplines we are at least matching the Web of Science right now. Okay, so what can we do? We're a search engine. You can search the scientific literature just like you would in the Web of Science or in Google Scholar by topics, objects, people, organizations. But you can also do other things. You can search for papers that are contextually similar to the papers that you're looking at. You can look for papers that are trending, as in papers that are actively looked at. That's more relevant for astrophysics because Earth science is so new. We're not actively used yet in the Earth sciences. But papers that are useful, that means those are the papers that are heavily cited by the collection of papers that you just found. Papers that are reviews, as in papers that cite the most papers in those that you just found. So there are some very relevant, very, very useful features that powerfully explore the literature. You can also do many other things. You can look at the open access versions of the papers, citations, references. We track the references. Papers that are site software. You can track metrics in the system. If there is time, I'm happy to show you some examples of what the system does. Importantly, you can look at collaborations. So for any subset of papers, you can look at which you can visualize authors. You can look at groups of co-authors that tend to publish together, and look at the papers that they published, and then look at the collaborations between yourself and the others, and between the other authors in your network as well. Metrics, citations, analytics. There is you can create your own bibliographies and export them in any language, in any format that might be of interest to you. AI/ML initiatives. Most recently we developed, a colleague of mine, Stephanie Jarmak, developed a SciX chat assistant that's ready to use, that allows you to create queries based on human language, and that then gets reformatted in a way that SciX can process. And we actively collaborate with NASA, IBM, and others to develop discipline-specific AI tools. We have an ambassador program, which is a part of our outreach. We solicit SciX ambassador applications, and right now we have a cohort of, I believe, 12 people who are PhD level students, early career scientists, and they conduct training sessions and presentations within their communities, and we sponsor some of their conference attendance. And they receive training with us, and they promote the platform. So if you encounter a SciX ambassador at one of the conferences, they do amazing work for us. And we also have just in the process of establishing a SciX advisory board. You may have seen a call come out. We received a lot of nominations, self-nominations. We also looked at our own knowledge of the disciplines, and we just now finalized the SciX advisory board, and those people will guide our our priorities as far as content management and community engagement. Okay, well, everything else is optional, so why don't maybe I'll stop sharing and then we can talk. And I'm happy to show anything that's of interest in the SciX system. How do I stop sharing? Let's see. This
Thanks,
is
Anna. That was good.
wonderful.
We're happy to have questions from people. Let's see, we've got one from Bob.
Yes, thank you very much, Nick. And whoops, what happened? Did I lose my? No, I still have the mic on. I think that was a great presentation and a fantastic system that you're describing. And I'm wondering, in terms of latency between the publication time and the time you're able to index the content from the journals and get it into your system, how long is that usually? Are you like right behind the journals, or?
That's a really great question. I would say it's at least a week, but Edwin is our content curation lead, and maybe if he can comment on that. Looks like he's online. So it takes us a week to index. We're actively ingesting the content from the publishers, but then it takes us a week to index and restart, reload the system. But Edwin, are you there? Are you able to comment on that?
So we are pretty.
Something wrong with his audio, I guess.
We're losing the connection. The thing is, both Edwin and I were at the American Meteorological Society meeting right now, and the connection here is not perfect.
Or
Yeah, so I think the point is we're not talking many months, we're talking weeks.
yeah, that's
1 or 2
great.
weeks.
Thank you very much, Anna.
So we have a question from Leslie about those collaboration visuals. Yeah, I was interested in those also.
Yes, yeah, I would.
How does that work? If you search on a person, and then is there some way of showing that graph on the website?
Yes, yeah. Let me reshare my screen and I'll show you.
Okay, great.
So let me. I need to load. Just share. Okay, so this is not currently showing SciX, but
Okay, we're seeing it.
okay, great. Let me load SciX. So it's sciexplorer.org, and it's usable right now. So you can go. What should I search for? Leslie, any specific?
Leslie, you can do Leslie if she doesn't
Right.
mind.
I always love searching for debris flows.
Okay, let's do debris flows. Fine. Mhm. Hopefully the connection is good enough here that we can do anything
Yeah,
here.
it's working.
Okay, so so here we see the progression in terms of time on this topic, and these are the authors, and of course these authors that come up first, they tend to be Chinese authors because of disambiguation that needs to happen, and you know among those Li Y people there are many authors, and it's possible to select the authors by clicking here and figuring out, you know, for each of these people you can look at specific affiliations and select who you want to see. So then you can look at institutions here. And these are institutions for all the authors as well. You can select institutions. And then, well, there are many things you can do, but I think the question was with respect to the authorship visualization. So you can go do explore and then look at author networks. And hopefully, I mean, this is 17,000 results, and under this connection, it might, this is a, well, actually, it loads. Yeah, it's not so bad. So these are the groups of co-authors, and for each of those groups, you can click on the group and you can look at the papers that are associated with this particular group, and you can also you can look at collaborations. Like if you do the link overlay,
Here we go.
yeah, these are the people that collaborate between themselves most commonly, and this is the thickness of those lines is the number of papers that they co-published. And you can also do things like for instance, I select this subgroup. Actually, I have to turn off the collaboration overlay for this. Oh, it's only showing the first 400 papers, so it's not complete. We can change that, but yeah, that's why it loads quickly. It's not showing 17,000 papers at once.
Okay.
That would not be usable. But you can select this subgroup, and you can add that to the filter, and then search, and that would only come up, with those debris flows papers from that subgroup of authors. And the groups are combined based on the co-authorship. It's not based on not based on contextual similarity. So if you wanted to look at similarity, you would do the concept cloud, this one, and that describes the concepts that are common to this group of papers. And then you can also, for any of those papers, you can select a concept. You could use that to narrow search results as well. And that only gives you a few people and a few papers. So Leslie, I don't know, I don't do debris flows. Is this information useful?
Thank you for showing that. That's very cool. And I recognize the group of USGS researchers there. So that is neat to be able to kind of see some organizational groupings if you know them. And I might follow up for like if we don't know the people are in a certain research group, ways to explore that as well. But thanks for showing that.
That's exactly. It's a pleasure. It's precisely how I use it a lot. I use it for example, I'm an associate editor for a geophysical journal of JGR, Journal of Geophysical Research, Solid Earth, and I find myself in a position when I really need to find people who have worked on this topic but who are not in conflict of interest with a group of people that publish a paper, that submitted this paper, and I use it for those purposes as well. It's a very powerful tool, and you can also do things like so to look at data. Obviously, we don't have as much data yet as we would like to, which is why I'm talking to you all. I mean, it's not the only reason, but I would love to establish additional data linkages. But we can just look at data, and we can also look at, so we can just say debris flows and then property data, and that will only show papers that have data associated with those papers. So then you can go to any of those papers, say this first one, and you can say, look at the data products, and you can just go and find the data set that's associated with that, assuming that everything works as it's supposed to. Yeah. So obviously the best linkages to data and to software would be through DOIs. So if unfortunately not all authors, as you will know, not all authors accurately and correctly refer to the data that they used. That is especially not true for historical publications, but it's also not always true even now. Even though AGU now has the policy of requiring that, it's an improvement, but it's not fully there. But obviously, if a paper has this information in the data statement, then we can mine the information out of the data statement. But it's also very common that they just mention that they used such and such, a data repository or such and such data set, and they just do it in text. So for that, it would be extremely useful to collaborate with the CDF and try to create those linkages.
So I have a question about, about those linkages. Do you, so would you be interested in, we have a variety of people here that have data repositories or work with data repositories. So for the journals, somehow you're getting access to various journals and you're ingesting them. Are you doing that with data repositories yet? I mean, you had some data sources there, but do you envision indexing over complete data repositories and connecting their papers and data together, sort of the data and the papers?
That's precisely what we would like to do. That's precisely right. So the only thing we are not doing, obviously, so for the literature, we ingest the full text. We are also, a digital library resource. We store the full text of the literature. We are not in the business of doing that with data. This is the CDF's,
Data is a lot bigger.
Yeah, we don't want to collect data. We don't want to collect software, but we want persistent identifiers to those data, and we want to be able to link to those.
Are you interested in metadata for data? Like,
yes, yes.
So funding and, all
Right.
these various other links that
Precisely.
people are putting there. Okay.
Very much so, yeah. And also we are very interested in creating smooth, scientific exploration capabilities, so that we can, if we could use the same control vocabulary, the same ontology to index the data resources as we use for the literature, then we would be able to recommend data resources as well.
There's many of the CDF members have worked with another ESIP group called science-on-schema.org, using schema.org to display having a standardized system for metadata for data sets. So I don't know if you're aware of them.
I'm aware, but we haven't worked closely yet. Just to clarify, I actually come from USGS. I'm, Leslie and I, we've known each other for many years, and I have only accepted this job in August of 2024. So the whole expansion into the earth sciences, the SciX team has been doing what they could, but they didn't have a scientist on board. So now that they have me, I'm very interested in getting this done. So if we can, consider maybe creating a working group and setting up a call and figuring out what can be done realistically to integrate those resources and to index data repositories, that would be very valuable to us.
Yeah, we would be happy to facilitate you reaching out with emails and so on if you like.
Yes, please do.
Bob, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Nick.
Sorry, I cut you off a little bit there.
It's all right. I actually have two questions, if that's okay. Well, no, the first is really a comment, and this might be helpful for your effort, Anna, to integrate data, and that is you could get the data documentation. That is, a lot of times, for instance, at our repository, we try to have a full documentation for a particular data product, and that describes the data product and how it was made, etc. limitations and, different aspects of the quality, et cetera. So if you index data documentation, then, and some of those are probably have DOIs on them as well. So that might be a great a win-win situation, not only for SciExplorer, but also because then people would be exposed to the data documentation through that and then be interested in the data. So that was my comment. My question is, I saw that little query you did there where you did the property and found data, and I'm just wondering, do you have an automatic way that you're able to determine whether an article is actually using data and citing that data, so that you can know for sure that that article does have data associated with it?
Right. Yeah, that's really good comment and question. Thank you. Well, right. Yeah. So as far as the second part of it, the usage of the data. So up until now, we've only been doing that. We've only been mining the papers for direct DOIs or direct links to data resources. So if the paper has directly, explicitly said, the authors explicitly wrote, we used this data set and provided the link to that. This is where those connections happened. In the future, we are also interested in, especially for the older papers that weren't abiding by the AGU FAIR data policy. We're very interested in mining the information out of the papers, and in that case, we'll be able to provide the information about the data that's been used with some levels of certainty. We wouldn't be able to say for sure that the paper used this data, but that's also something that we're working on.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, you might want to think about utilizing the documentation as a way
Yes.
to, they're equivalent to papers.
Yeah, is there a specific resource or specific resources where we could look for the documentation?
Yeah, well, the NASA Socioeconomic Data and Application Center, called CDAC, SEDAC, we have documentation for our data sets.
We'll go ahead and check that out.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We may already be doing this without me knowing, because I'm not aware of everything that's been done before I stepped in, but probably not, because I don't think we've been indexing data documentation yet. The challenge is very few data sets are adequately documented.
Yeah, that's our challenge too. Thanks.
We've got a question here from Karen and then
Yes, please.
Leslie.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Really interesting presentation. A couple of questions that I don't know if you want to field them here or just say, let's form a working group or something. But I've got a couple groups that might be interested. So I'm interested in sort of if there are standards for participation, like for example, you mentioned that you have controlled vocabularies that you're already using for the literature search. Getting that sort of information would be helpful. And then also just to agree with what Nick said, that a lot of us are working pretty hard on implementing the schema.org, the science on schema.org. So if there's a way that we can make that effort also work for your group, I think that could be a real win.
Yes. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just saying, are you aware of like Google's data set search system?
I've tried it a long time ago and it wasn't great. Should it?
It's improved dramatically, and they do use this schema.org. So we sort of, the science on schema.org is an extension of that, and sort of plays into that, and Google indexes all these sites that have this science on schema.org system set up. So
that's great to know.
And there are other groups that are leveraging
Doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know like the UN has an ocean data information system that's schema.org based, and there's geocodes in the US. So it's sort of a multi-use approach.
Yeah, hopefully can be spreading and lots of people can have portals on top and search and index with this system. That's the dream anyway. Leslie?
Hi, Anna from Australia.
Hi, Leslie.
I just wanted to ask one quick question and then do a follow-up. You're clearly sort of indexing the data and the data sets. Are you doing that from the data availability statement, or where are you picking up the data sets?
That's precisely right. So for now, I think we're only doing, Edwin might be able to correct me, but I think we're only doing data availability and acknowledgements right now. But we might, Edwin, are we mining the full text for those references as well right now?
I hope my connection is a bit better now.
Yes, it is.
We also look in the reference sections, but for specific DOI prefixes for which we know that they are from data repositories.
Okay, so the reason I ask, I'm a chair of the COPDES, and Danny Kincaid's here as well. ESIP group, the Coalition of Publishers and Data Repositories in Earth Sciences. And one of the things we've picked up is that and this is also coming out of an AGU project with Shelley Stahl, is that the indexes are only pulling out data sets from the bibliographic references. They do not pull it out of the data availability statement. And so our message that we're blasting from on high is that if you cite the data set in the text, make sure it's also in the data availability statement, because that's the requirement from a lot of the publishers. But to be indexed, it has to be in the bibliographic references. And as you can imagine, we're getting a lot of frustrated researchers who are complaining bitterly and saying, well, why bother with the data availability statement? So I'm just sort of going away happy from this, because if you are, someone is actually indexing the data availability statement, that's a great bit of news. Oh, I see Danny's chipped in. Go, Danny.
Well, that is one great point, Leslie. I don't want to detract from that. I had a slightly follow-on question about this, that it'd be interesting for repositories to partner with SciX just to do the exercise of comparing these linkages that repositories are making to the publications versus what SciX has already indexed. So it's kind of following on to Leslie, how much is actually accurate versus vetting these two sources of linkages together to see where the gaps and overlaps or vetting or validating these are until the system gets more robust. But I'm wondering.
Yeah, that sounds great. And that actually sounds like potentially a very nice possible funded project that we could
Yeah, I think it would be really cool. And I think there might be, I don't know how many other repositories. So we've done this historically by hand. I'm pretty sure that other oceanographic repositories are doing this as well. I know R2R was doing it for a while by hand. And and so we have them in our metadata. But we don't, they're by hand, right? So yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I hear that everywhere. All of the data providers always want to know the impact of their data. People who obtain the data and provided the data, they would be able to get credit if they knew the impact. So it's an overwhelming kind of requirement to find out the impact of, the number of publications that use the data in various ways, and doing it by hand is extremely overwhelming. And also it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. That's right. So that's great that you're interested in that. I know you guys are going through your a lot of like growing activities right now and your advisory board and all of that. But when that settles, maybe revisiting with the CDF and finding out who's willing to embark on this, I think it would be a really neat exercise, and it would certainly help us, repositories, that is. But
that's great. I think that we can already start talking about this, because this is it's our one of the highest priorities is connections to data and software.
Awesome. Yeah, this was great. Thanks for I agree with Leslie. It was really cool visualizations. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I've just popped in the chat as a follow-up. That's a paper I cite quite regularly to show authors, hey, you got to get it in 3 places. But it's really great to know that you are indexing the data availability statements, because that's the first time I've heard someone's doing it.
We're in a position to do something like this because we've been doing natural language processing for a long time, and it's kind of rare for scientific repositories to be doing this, because it requires a whole separate set of expertise. But thankfully, we have that.
Yeah, in the data repositories that I work with, I mean, we've set up to where if you put data in, it has to be associated with a paper. So all of our data sets have papers that are linked from our data sets, but the links coming back from the papers are sporadic. We do try to get them in the bibliography, but you know, that's another thing that most people aren't used to doing, and so it doesn't always get done.
And award numbers is another really important connection as well. That could also link publications with data, but it also can provide provide the funders the information that they need to keep funding people. So, yeah, we're looking into that as well. It's surprisingly difficult. Even within NASA, very few NASA data sets that are archived back at NASA have the award numbers or the publications associated with them.
Yeah, we've just started doing that in the last few years. All right, well, that was great, Anna. I thought it was a good meeting this week. Does anybody else have anything else to add, or we're coming up to the end of the hour here? If not, well, thanks everybody for coming. I'll stop the